morning, Black Enterprise Women of Power and guests. Thanks to my Prudential crew. Got to have a crew. It's been a great conference so far, and I'm looking forward to the conversations, networking, and workshops in store for our last day together. I'm honored to be with you all this morning and really excited about this morning's conversation that counts with two giants of American politics, Simone Sanders and Valerie Jarrett. If anyone knows about shifting narratives, it is both of these women. And while their paths have been wildly different, they have each dedicated their lives to the hard and often uncomfortable work of revolutionary change in America, especially on issues of social justice, civil rights, and equality. Those values are very important to me, and it makes me proud to work for a company like Prudential, one that is driven by a similar passion for equity. More than 140 years ago, we were founded on the idea of inclusion and a conviction that financial security should be within reach for all Americans. It's a foundational belief that still drives us today as we continue to build pathways for more Americans to achieve financial security and the peace of mind that it brings. Candidly, maximizing that belief can be challenging. Research shows us that nearly 2/3 of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency, and I think we heard on this stage maybe $400. That is not more than a car repair. And just a few weeks ago, the partial government shutdown put a national spotlight on the need for emergency savings. We learned through our own research that nearly half of all affected federal workers could not make their bill payments. They actually fell behind in their bills. This is a challenge that is bigger than business. In many ways, the financial instability faced by many Americans is a national crisis, especially among women and people of color, who most often bear the biggest burden of these financial challenges. I don't have to tell this room about the double whammy of gender and racial wealth gaps that plague women of color, who are often not married and single household earners with lower wages than our male counterparts. And unfortunately, there is still overwhelming silence surrounding the importance of including race and other intersectional identities in this conversation about money. But I am proud to say that Prudential is working to change that. Later this year, we will unveil an important project that we've been working on to reach more Black women about their finances, and more importantly, to begin a dialogue about the legacy of money in our community. It's part of our bigger commitment to put financial security within reach of all. Without question, there's plenty of work to be done, and I am inspired by the leadership and commitment of sheroes like Valerie and Simone, who continue to be catalysts for the kind of change that moves our common purpose forward. I'm grateful for their voices, and I look forward to a spirited intergenerational conversation this morning. On behalf of Prudential, thank you.
Thank you, Celine, and thank you again to Prudential Financial. Well, ladies, Valerie Jarrett is here. Yeah. The ultimate White House insider and the longest-serving senior advisor to President Barack Obama. Certainly, she comes with unparalleled credentials: attorney, business leader, board member, public servant, political maven. But Valerie Jarrett is also a daughter and a mother and a woman juggling all of life's challenges, just like us. She joins us on the eve of the April release of her memoir, Finding My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward, to give us an exclusive, up-close sneak peek. Interviewing Ms. Jarrett is an amazing and accomplished woman in her own right. She was the former National Press Secretary for United States Senator Bernie Sanders, and on any given day or evening, you can hear her power-packed opinions as a political commentator on CNN. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome the former senior advisor for the Obama administration, Valerie Jarrett, and CNN's Simone Sanders.
Oh, this is so great. It's packed.
It is packed in the house. Good morning, everybody.
Well, good morning, women of power.
Who was up late last night?
Well, we're happy so many of you got up early this morning to join us. I know you weren't going to miss the incomparable boss lady, Valerie Jarrett, right? So we're going to jump right into our conversation, and I want to let y'all know that we are going to take questions at the end, so think about your questions. And ladies, we are taking questions, not soliloquies. Questions, not soliloquies. All right, now, I teach a class on Mondays. Talk back to me. So, Valerie, first of all, I'm very excited to be here. I love you.
I love you right back.
So you have a new book coming out very soon. Your book is entitled Finding My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward. Your book will be available April 2nd. You can pre-order right now.
Right now? Right now? Pull out
Right
your
now,
phone.
okay.
Amazon.
Penguin Random House. Tell me, why did you decide to write this book? Because there are a lot of books you could have written. But
That is
why did you decide to write this book?
Well, you know my daughter, Laura.
I love her.
Thank you very much. So my daughter went from a career in law to a career in journalism. And in between, she decided to interview me for StoryCorps, so oral history. And so my staff said, well, we'll help Laura with the questions. And so right before they started filming, Laura said, you don't mind if I just ask my own questions, do you? And I was like, well, if I can't trust you, who am I going to trust, right? So the first question she asked me was, what would you tell a 30-year-old Valerie Jarrett? She was 30 at the time. And I thought, well, that's a really good question. And so I started to answer that question. And after I did, she said, you should write a book. And then I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what? I have a lot to say to a 15-year-old Valerie Jarrett and a 20-year-old Valerie Jarrett and on up to a 60-year-old Valerie Jarrett. And so that's what really, she was the motivation for all good things in my life, including writing this book. So it's a story of my journey, and it's a zigzaggy story, and there's good stuff, and there's hard stuff, and I thought by opening it up and showing how I developed, it might help somebody else develop too.
Absolutely. I think this is a book that speaks to women, but people in general in an intergenerational sense.
Yes.
And you talk about finding your voice. In the book you write, you found your voice in Harold Washington's historic administration. So, yes, shout out to Harold Washington. It's Chicago in the house. Chicago.
All the way in the back row. South Side, anybody?
Okay, South Side. So talk to me about that journey.
All right, so before Harold Washington was first elected in 1983, when I was about 12 years old at the time, I really wasn't very involved in politics. I will confess to you, I didn't know who my alderman was. I didn't even know how many aldermen there were. But there was something about his campaign that was so inclusive. And really for the first time, I think, in Chicago, black people were like, wait a minute, we could have a candidate. Now, nobody actually thought he could win, right? But we were excited about his candidacy. So after he won the first time, I started paying attention. I started reading the newspaper. I was curious about what he was trying to do. And I discovered he had this progressive agenda. So when he won the second time, it happened right when I kind of hit rock bottom in my career. And, well, all right, so we're going to talk.
What do you mean, rock bottom?
We're going to talk today, right? All right, so.
This is a family conversation.
It's a very family conversation. So when I was coming out of college, I decided I needed a plan, like a 10-year plan. How many of you made plans coming out of college? All right, we all did. All right, so 10 years. And my plan went like this. Okay, I was going to go right to law school because I come from a family of academics, and they wanted me to have an advanced degree. I slept through the GMATs, and so law school, I took the LSATs, and I got in. And then I said, okay, so my plan, I'll go right to law school. I'll find out what I care about passionately in the practice of law. I will move back to Chicago because I've been gone for a while. I will fall madly in love. I will have a baby by the time I am 30, thinking about that biological tick, tick, tick. And then I'm going to live happily ever after, right?
That was your plan.
That was my plan. So I went right to law school. I came back to Chicago. I went to one law firm. Then I traded up to a better law firm, more prestigious law firm. I married, figuratively, the boy next door. In that, his mom grew up in the same apartment building with my mother. His grandmother and my mother were friends. He was a doctor, my father was a doctor, our dads were friends. What could possibly go wrong?
Everything.
Ooh, baby. Ooh, my goodness.
Talk to me about it, Valerie, because as my mother likes to say, I don't have a prospect or a potential right now. So talk to me. And I turned 30 this year, okay?
Well, let me say this to you, and this is serious. There is nothing more lonely than being in an unhappy marriage. For all of you who are single and you think you're lonely, oh, baby, you don't know what lonely is until you are unhappy. Now, I did have my daughter, Laura, just shy of my 29th birthday, so that was the one thing I did right on schedule, and it has been perfect for the last 33 years. I know. Now, there were some bad years in there. I'm not being completely truthful, like 14, 15, 16. But she's back. She came back home. They do come back. Just don't kill them during those years. My mom said, you're alive. Don't kill her. Don't kill her. But anyway, so there I am in my fancy law firm in Chicago in what was then the Sears Tower. It's got another name today, but I was on the 79th floor, a view of Lake Michigan, beautiful sailboats, and I would sit in that office with my back to the door and cry. And I thought, this could not be my life. I was not meant to be this miserable. I'm a happy person. And I had to figure out what to do. So this is what takes us to Harold Washington. He had just won his re-election and also control of the city council. And a good friend of mine said to me, you cannot just continue to do what you're doing. And I thought, Laura will never be proud of me if I'm sitting up at this law firm bored to tears. And so he said, why don't you join the administration? You're going to feel a part of something bigger than yourself. And that resonated with me. And since I had finally been paying attention the last 4 years to politics and to service, I thought, well, let me try it. And so I took a leap of faith. Wow. And I joined the city's law department where my client were the people of Chicago, and he was determined to give those who did not have a voice representation, and that resonated with me too. And I left that fancy office, I walked into City Hall my first day, and I walked into 5th floor, and it said Office of the Mayor. Well, that wasn't my office, but I walked down the hall, and it said Corporation Counsel, and my boss met me in reception. He goes, let me take you to your office, and he did air quotes. I'm like, what you doing air quotes for?
Because you got a cube.
I had
that open air. I done worked in the open air, that open space.
Open air cubicle with a big window facing an alley with another building right up against it, so there may as well have been no window. But I will tell you the truth, I walked in there and I said, this is where I belong. And it was there that I began to, well, first of all, I trusted my voice to leave that law firm when everybody was telling me you've got the greatest job in the world, and I knew I didn't feel like it. And so it's that quiet voice we tend to ignore that I trusted. But also, it was in city government that I started advocating for other people. And I realized I could use my voice and my talents and my skills to help people who did not have a voice. And that really was transformative for me. That's really where my life truly began.
Wow. So, I guess if there is, one thing you could tell a young Valerie, one thing to help her navigate the waters as she's growing up in Chicago, as she leaves to come back, like what is the one thing you would tell, not even not young Valerie, what would you tell young Simone?
Let's get specific.
Let's get specific. What would you tell young people? Because I will tell you, in the group chats, I'm gonna ask you about your group chat shortly.
Yes.
But in the group chats, people are like, we got to get our Valerie Jarrett on. Okay, and that's what we say, and we're like, but how does that happen? What do you tell young women who are navigating the waters of whether it's politics or corporate America? What would you tell us?
Well, I wrote a whole book about that, but
buy the book.
I will give you buy the book. But this is what I think. This is what I learned. Is first of all, my 10-year plan showed that I was craving a straight line, and the adventure is in the zigzag. The adventure is in the zigzag.
That's a tweetable, y'all. Tweet that.
And I just didn't have confidence to do that, to take those risks, and I should have, because I come from a family of risk takers. And you know, my father, who grew up in DC, and my mom grew up in Chicago during Jim Crow, where there's a lot of discrimination, and he couldn't get a job as a physician in a teaching hospital in the United States. And so my parents go to Shiraz, Iran. Now, you know there are no black people in Shiraz, Iran. They knew nothing about it, but they needed a hospital there, and that was back when the United States had better relations with Iran. And so from there, he started doing research. And that research caught the eye of somebody who was at the Galton Labs at University College of London. And so then, after 5 years in Iran, we moved to London. And in London, he started to give papers and deliver these papers at conferences like this, not quite this big, but conferences. And the dean of the University of Chicago Medical School, oh, yes, indeedy, the dean there heard the paper and offered him the job.
Wow.
And so what he always said to me growing up was sometimes the shortest distance to where you want to go is the longest way around, because he couldn't have gotten that job unless he'd gone across the world, right?
Wow.
So I knew that intellectually, but I was still afraid. And once I went into city government and I knew I was thriving there and I knew I could ignore all the people, including some of my family, who said, "What are you doing?" My mother's like, "I paid all that tuition and you're gonna go work where, girl?" And I said, "Trust me on this." And it was years later where she's like, "Okay, I guess that was a pretty good move." And so I want you all to listen to that quiet voice inside of you. And I want you to take risks, and I want you to know that you have a safety net. And that is your experience, your education, your temperament, all this stuff is going for you. So you can swerve, and opportunities do not knock at opportune moments. So don't be looking for it to be right when you want it.
That's another tweetable. I'm gonna help y'all catch these Valerie Jarrett gems today. So I know lots of people might be wondering, I've heard this story, but I would love for you to tell it. How did you meet the Obamas? I was at, where was I?
Hard to say.
I don't even know where I was, but you and Mrs. Obama were sitting on a stage together, Leading Women Defined last year, and you talked about how you met each other. So how did you meet the Obamas?
All right, so after working for 4 years in the law department of the city, I was promoted to be Mayor Daley's deputy chief of staff. And I was trying to staff up the office, and I didn't exactly know what to do, so I started asking everybody I know, who are the smart people you know who might want to come into government? And so a good friend of mine sent me a resume, and across the top it said, "Brilliant young lawyer, has no interest in the private practice of law, would like to explore public service." And so I'm like, that's my kind of person. And you know, it was Princeton undergrad, Harvard Law School, working at Sidley Austin, great law firm. So the name was Michelle Robinson. So I call her up and I said, "Would you like to come in and chat?" So she comes in the door, and first of all, she walks in the door, she's like 27 years old, she's a baby. And no offense to the 27-year-olds in the world, but she shakes my hand, and she was dressed like in all black with her hair pulled back and hardly any makeup, and she had that laser-like look, and she just exuded confidence. And instead of walking me through her resume, which let's face it, a lot of people do when they're in a job interview, she told me her story. She told me about growing up on the south side of Chicago. Her father was a blue-collar worker. The fact that he had been a precinct captain, and so she had some exposure to politics, that she was bored to tears at that law firm and felt as though it was not tapping her strengths. And I said, honey, I understand that. And we shared a lot with each other. And so it was supposed to be 20-minute interview, hour and a half in. She had turned the tables on me. Now she's asking me questions. I had no answers. I'd just gotten that job too. What did I know about what I was offering her? But we really clicked. So I give her a job offer on the spot. I had no authority to give her that job offer. Had not talked to my boss, but I was like, she's perfect. She's perfect. So a few days later, we're talking, and I said, "So what do you think? Are you going to come and work here?" She said, "Well, I have bad news." I'm like, "What?" She said, "My fiance does not think it's a good idea."
Oh.
And I'm like, "Well, who is
who is he?
And why do we care what he thinks?
Who is he?
Who is he? Who is he who's getting in the way of me recruiting you?"
The audacity.
The audacity
of hope.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
We didn't even practice. We didn't practice.
We did not practice that, but that was pretty good. So she said he started his career as a community organizer on the south side of Chicago, and he is a little worried about me going and working for Mayor Daley. And I've been a lawyer, and you at least were a lawyer for the city for a while before you went into the frying pan and then the fire. What would I be doing? And so she said, would you have dinner with us? And I said, yes. That was a good move on my part. Because it began this really, now 28-year-long relationship with the two of them. And I'll never forget how in love they were and how they listened to each other. And again, at the dinner, we told each other our stories. And I think that if you want somebody to invest in you, and if you want to invest in them, you have to open up. And we talk a lot about mentorship, and I just think sometimes people will see me somewhere and they'll go, would you be my mentor? And I go, I don't know you. Find a mentor who knows you and who cares about you, and take the time to let them get to know you, which means you got to let yourself be a little vulnerable and let people in. And you might get hurt, but it's worth it.
Okay, so please, you can clap for that. Take that back to your communities, okay? Because I'm tired of folks running up to people asking them, be my mentor. No, give me some advice is what you really want to know.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
ask that. Okay, so there might be, look now. So I know many women might have an interest of going from public service to private practice, or just back and forth in between. So tell us why you think it's both important to work in the public and private sector, and how did you navigate the transition? Because it's not easy.
It's not easy, but for me, it was important. And so I said to you that look, as much as I complained about that law firm, and I'm sorry to anybody here who's at a law firm, but it taught me a lot about the practice of law, and I think I'm a much better client now, having practiced law for 10 years. And I think I was a much better client working on behalf of the city of Chicago, having had the rigors of a private sector practice. And what I find is that the skills that I've developed both in and out of government, many of them you need those skills no matter whether you're in the private sector or the public sector. I do think that the public sector calls on certain skills that I did not fully exercise or appreciate.
Like what?
Well, so for example, let's say when I'm a CEO of my company, I can't just tell people what to do and expect that they're going to do it. And I learned in government, you have to get people's buy-in, which means you got to listen to people. You can't think you know all the answers. And I became a very good listener in government because a big part of what I was doing was trying to figure out how could government be in service of the people, which means you actually have to pay attention to what they say so that you know how to serve them best. And so I think a lot of the leadership skills and the work ethic that I started out with in the law firm really helped me. And then when I went to the private sector, I knew how government worked. And I was a real estate developer, and I used to see so many developers when I was in government who had no idea about the public policy issues that government was trying to sort through when they would come in and say, I want all that land and I want to do this. I already had that experience, and so I could say to my colleagues in the private sector, this is what makes government work. Anticipate these issues. It will save us money and time on the front end. And then I always say that it's good to start local. And whether you are in government or whether you are volunteering at your local community center, there's something about the geography of your neighborhood, and I worry that we're losing that a little bit as we are all on these devices, because now that's your community, right? But I liked going into my grocery store. My cousin Becky's here. Didn't you like going into Mr. G's and we knew the people who worked there, right? I liked that sense of belonging to a geographic area in addition to this community. And when you work in local government, you get this appreciation of what's happening on the ground. And when I worked there, I used to say, I will never, ever work for the federal government. Ever. They were the enemy because they were off in Washington and they weren't paying any attention to what we wanted, and they had all these programs and silos, and we were supposed to bend what we wanted to do to fit those programs. I'm like, why can't you bend those programs to meet what we want to do on the ground? And so when I went to the federal government, it was with that perspective in mind. And it was very helpful when you think of when President Obama took office. We were in the middle of the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. We're losing millions of jobs, people are losing millions of homes, banks are about to collapse. Having run a business and having known the certainty that businesses were looking for at a time of great uncertainty, I think helped me be a better player at that table when we were making some hard decisions And let's face it, the business sector is the economic engine. And if we aren't in touch with them and government, then we're going to miss our objective.
Absolutely.
Not the only voice, but an important voice.
But it's an important voice, key players at the table.
Key players at the table.
So I learned that you actually remained the CEO of Habitat Company and joined the Obama campaign at the same time.
I did.
So you had 2 jobs.
I had 2 jobs.
Tell us about that experience, and what was it about the campaign that compelled you to really devote all of this time and energy? Okay, because I have been on the campaign trail. People trying to get me to go back on the campaign trail right now. And I'm like,
It's hard.
I don't know.
It's very hard work.
Tough.
It's tough.
I like brunch.
You like brunch. There's no brunch.
No brunch on
There's
the
no
campaign
brunch on
trail.
the campaign trail unless it's like biscuits at a Hampton Inn somewhere. That's about the brunch that you get. Well, so 2 jobs. Well, first of all, I had raised my daughter as a single mom, and I had worked. So I already had 2 jobs, right? We all have multiple jobs. It's what we do.
Yeah.
And Laura had just gone off to college, so that was one, not that you ever completely are not a mom anymore, but it was a lot less demanding than when she was right there underfoot, and I was trying to figure out why is she not home at 11 o'clock. And I had the chairman of my company really gave me the latitude to say, you can work from anywhere. And so I was multitasking, and so I'd be on conference calls back at the office while I was trudging through Iowa. And it was, the reason why I did it is I just love Barack and Michelle Obama. And so if I had a chance to help his campaign, why wouldn't I? It was a chance of a lifetime. It was a labor of love. It's hard, it's rigorous. You all heard from Senator Harris yesterday, and she looked awfully good, because I know she's tired. And you gotta keep yourself up no matter what, because you're in front of a new audience every day. But I learned a lot in Iowa, as I'm sure you did too. It's a part of the country I wasn't that familiar with. I traveled all over our great country, and I met people of all walks of life, and I saw so many ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that's what actually keeps me optimistic to this day in the midst of chaos that we're seeing. There are so many good people out there. And unfortunately, the press often doesn't focus on that. It focuses on the controversy and the tension. And so keeping myself busy and on the road and meeting new people is something that I learned really initially in that campaign, and I continue to this day.
You talked about Iowa. So what was it like going from working with CEOs and professional business folks and then to working with staffers in Iowa and in office?
Well, they were.
What was challenging about that?
You know what? It was fascinating because the way we ran our campaign, the field organizers, who were all like right out of college, 20-something-year-old, they were in charge. And so if I would go into Waterloo, Iowa as a surrogate, then somebody would meet me, Johannes Abraham, who later became my chief of staff.
Love Johannes.
Is just an extraordinary young man. He would meet me at my hotel, and he would drive me to wherever we were going, whether it was at black churches or meeting with a group of community folks. And I did what he told me to do, because he was the boss. And the reason why he was the boss is because he had been in Iowa for 6 months. And he knew the people that were in that community. He'd been in their living rooms. He'd seen their anguish and their joy. And so when he brought me in, I was coming in not as a stranger. And we found that to be an important part of our strategy, is that we wanted the people across America to know that we wanted to stick. We weren't just in and out, we wanted to be there with them and get to know them. And so I enjoyed working for these young folks. And then when President Obama won, I had been all over the country, so I knew the best of the very best staff. But some of them had a hard time because they were used to being the boss. And I'm like, oh, no, now I'm the boss.
Now
You're not the boss up in here. So we had to turn that table, and it took a moment for some of them to get the hang of that.
So fast forward, we've all heard the title as Senior Advisor to the President. And
It has
President
such a
Obama,
ring.
to be clear.
Yes, let's add that. That was a good title.
Oh, yes, great time. Don't linger in it too long, ladies. Don't sit in it too long. Okay, but 8 years, you held that title for 8 years. So walk us through that role. What was a day? I mean, when people always say, what's a day in the life? Every day is different.
Every day is different.
But walk us through the role. Give us a glimpse into what it was like to not only be in the White House, but be a part of history and just do really great, amazing work for the American people.
Well, first of all, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Privilege of a lifetime. And if anybody had told me when I was sitting in that office in the Sears Tower that one day I would work for the President of the United States, and that eventually I would be the longest serving advisor, not just for President Obama, but in history. Now that's some crazy stuff. Who knew?
Who knew? But you know what? If anyone, a black woman.
Well, I will say this. I don't know why anyone would leave. And I used to tell him all the time, my job was much better than his job. His job was it was much harder. And the reason why is that he had us there to, he had policy councils, and we would debate issues in those policy councils. And then they would come up to his senior advisors and his chief of staff, and we would read everything that went to him. We would prepare these memos for him. He did his reading at night. I never once, I'm just saying.
I hear some people don't read. I don't know.
I will say this to you, and I am serious as I can be. In 8 years, I never one time saw him walk into the office in the morning unprepared. He was never unprepared. Couldn't afford to be unprepared. He knew there was no wiggle room for him, and he also knew why he did this, why he got into it in the first place, which gets us back to Iowa and the people that we were there to serve. And I like to tell this story about a young, older man I met on the campaign trail in Texas. And we were down there, and it was early one morning, and he was operating our elevator. And we get in the elevator, and it's early, and President Obama's a little grumpy, then Senator Obama's kind of grumpy. He's not a morning person. Don't tell him I told you that, but he's not a morning person. I am a morning person. I'm not very perky in the morning, so I had to learn how to take it down a notch. So the elevator, guy operating the elevator clears his throat. He says, "Sir, I'd like to give you something." And I'm thinking, this is not the time to start a conversation. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. So he pulls out a patch from his military uniform. And I'm nosy. I'm looking at it. And realize what it is, and then Senator Obama realizes, "Oh, sir, I couldn't possibly accept your patch." And the guy's like, "No, I insist," and they go back and forth and back and forth. Finally, the guy says, "Sir, I've carried this patch with me every day for 40 years. And it's kept me safe when I served our country. It's kept me strong as I've had humble jobs and tough times, and I want you to have it," right? So I burst into tears. And I don't mean like a little bit. I mean like I'm heaving in the elevator.
That deep cry.
The deep crying. And this,
We need some water.
right? And this is before people start like handing newborn babies to him over like a mosh pit of people. They weren't doing that back then, right? I still think that was crazy. But anyway, so later in the day I said to him, "What did you do with that patch?" And he said, "I put it in my pocket." And I thought, you know what, typical guy. I don't mean like, where did you put it? I meant, how does it make you feel? You know what I'm talking about, ladies.
That's why you're the senior advisor. You got to coach him.
Well, in this instance, he got the better of me. Because he said, "Valerie, I meant I put it in my pocket." So he reaches in his pocket, and he puts on the table like 10 or 12 trinkets. And he tells me the story of each one, the person's name if he knew it, where he was, the circumstances behind, and why it was so special that he put it in his pocket. So, long story to say, every single day for 8 years, when I drove through the gates of the White House, you stop as you're going through the security, and I would look at the Washington Monument on my right, and I'd look at that White House, and I'd say, I am going to work for that man. For that man.
Oh, it's such an amazing story. So, what was your most inspiring moment in the White House?
Oh my gosh.
You got to pick one. Pick one of your most inspiring moments. I'm sure there
are many. Well, all right, so I'll tell you this story. So the night that the Affordable Care Act passed was March 21st. And it was a first day of spring, an unseasonably warm evening. And it reminded me kind of the temperature in Grant Park on election night. And so I had gone home early to watch the vote count on TV because we knew we had the votes. And I put on my pajamas, I got a big bowl of popcorn, and my best friend who lived across the hall, who was the person who sent me Michelle Robinson's resume, Susan Schur, who now worked in the White House, she came over and we're sitting there, phone rings, and it's Katie Johnson, who was President Obama's assistant. And she says, "Valerie, President Obama would like everybody who worked on the Affordable Care Act to come back to the White House and watch the vote together." And I said, "Oh, that's so sweet, Katie, but you know what? I'm in my pajamas. Got my popcorn. Susan and I are here. We're good." And Katie says, "President Obama would like everybody."
This is not a request. Come on back.
So I'm like, "Oh, that's right. He's my boss. Get dressed, go back to the White House." And after the vote, Mrs. Obama was out of town, so he's like, to 100 people, come on upstairs and we're going to celebrate. And I know there must have been people going, he's invited 100 people upstairs. Anybody got pigs in a blanket? Anybody got some champagne? So we go upstairs and we're out on the Truman balcony, which is one of my most favorite places on earth. We spent a lot of time on that balcony. It's like one of the few places where he could go outside and just like breathe some fresh air and feel safe. And so we're out there, and about 2 in the morning, I won't tell you how many martinis he had, but I had 2. And so the crowd is starting to wean out, and I sidled up to him, and he's looking out over the Washington and the Jefferson Memorial and beautiful lawn. And I said to him, it's so beautiful tonight and you look so happy. It reminds me of election night. I said, how do you feel now compared to election night? And he said something I'll never forget. He said, Valerie, there is no comparison. Election night was just a means to get to this night. And I thought, that's why I work for you. That's why I came back to the White House that night.
I love it.
And it says so much because you just, you have to be straight about why you're there. And if you really want to serve, you have to be of service. And you can't get confused and start to think it's all about you, because it's not about you. It's about us.
It's about us. And thanks to all the work that you all did in that fateful night, there is now healthcare for millions of Americans.
So far, but I will say this to you, and it's one of the things that motivates me now, after I didn't see it coming. I have to tell you, I did not see the election coming, results coming. And so after I kind of came out of my fetal position where I was crouched down, we all did, trying to figure out, well, what happened? And I think the thing that stuck with me most is that only 43% of eligible voters voted. And so Mrs. Obama and I last summer started an organization I chair the board of called When We All Vote. And I feel like our most minimum responsibility of citizenship is to vote. And so many people, particularly young people now, are kind of shunning institutions of all kinds, not just government. And if it's going to be a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people, with the people who sacrificed for us to vote, we have to vote. And we have seen how black women change the results of elections, right? But it can't be just us. It also has to be, we got to get those little knucklehead young adult men that we have in our families, and we got to get them to vote. We've got to really change the culture. And so that's one of the things that we're doing now. So yes, we all still have the Affordable Care Act, but for the first time in 4 years, the number of people who are insured is going down. And so when there are town hall meetings, we have to show up, and we have to make sure our voices are heard. And we have to vote for people who are going to protect your interests.
Exactly. Elections are upon us. And I know everybody talks about 2020, but there's elections happening in 2019.
Yes,
so
exactly.
We have to be laser focused. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for Valerie Jarrett.
Thank you.
Author of
Thank
Finding
you.
My Voice, My Journey to the West Wing and the Path Forward.
Thank you.
Y'all are kind. Sit down, we're gonna take some questions. They're like, yes, we want more.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take a couple questions, ladies and gentlemen. There are microphones at the front of the room, I think at the back of the room. So we're going to take as many as possible. And we are taking questions, not? All right. I believe my sister right here at the front was first to the microphone.
I just have to
And as the room will quiet down, we'll be able to hear the question.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Valerie. This has been so inspiring, just amazing. My name is Jackie McKinley, and I am a Vice President of Sales, first African-American Vice President of Sales for Dell Technologies.
A badass.
I know, right?
Thank you. And I say that humbly for advice. When you wanted to come in, not necessarily in the Obama administration, maybe prior to that, and you had some creative ideas that you want to implement that may have been different than the establishment. How did you get your voice heard, get the ideas implemented, and move it to action?
It's a great question.
That is an excellent question. How do you make sure your voice is heard? And how do you be a change agent, particularly in organizations that are resistant to change? And that would be all organizations. Everybody wants to change if you don't mean me. Like, you should change, but I'm not changing. Well, one lesson I learned very early on, I told you I slept through the GMATs, right? So I did not know a lot about management from practicing law. And so one of the positions I held in government was Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Development. I did not have an urban planning background. And so my deputies knew I did not know as much as they did. And so one of the things I would do is I would listen at the very beginning of every meeting. And I would try to learn. And I would ask questions. And I think in so doing, people began to trust me. And when I would say, well, how about this? And they said, well, we tried that in 1962 and it didn't work. I would say, okay, but this is now 1983, so let's see if we can take what didn't work and address it and like move. And it's like you have to move people incrementally. It's very hard to move people like this. And so you've got to give them the space to contribute as you're having them move. And I found that that is one of the more useful strategies. And then the other thing I would say is that you really have to over-communicate when you've made a decision. If people feel that you are transparent and open and you are consultative, so I mean, the best example I could give you is President Obama. I did not agree with every single decision he made. Most of them, yes. But when I didn't, I felt the process was fair. I felt my voice had been heard. I felt that he respected not just me, but the junior person at the table who also felt empowered to speak up. And you have to give people permission to speak up. They will not just speak up on their own. And then the other thing you have to have, and you should take some time to develop it when you're starting a new job, is you have to have an affirmative agenda. When I first started in planning, I thought one of the things that's wrong with government is it's not responsive. And so I answered every piece of mail, and I responded to every single phone call. And I did that for like the first month. And you know what? I was very responsive, but I did not get a single thing done that I wanted to get done. And I didn't even have the space to think. And you need to give yourself that space if you're a manager. And so I think you have to build a team around you that will help you so you're not trying to do it all yourself. You have to encourage people to be honest with you and to push back on you so you make informed decisions, and then you just have to slowly keep pushing. And suddenly they'll look up and they'll go, well, how did I get here? But they'll feel better about it, even if they're not 100% that that wasn't their idea to begin with.
Outstanding. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's your name and what's your question?
Hello, Tiana Cunningham, PepsiCo.
Okay, Pepsi, we see you.
My question is this. Ms. Valerie Jarrett, I think it is no surprise you are dope.
Thank you.
With that in mind, what has it cost you to be Valerie Jarrett? And as we think about people like myself, other folks across the PepsiCo family, rising stars, people in this building, how do we then mitigate against some of those costs and the things that I think we will never be able to truly anticipate?
Whoa, my goodness.
What has it cost you to be Valerie Jarrett? I'm mad I didn't have that question.
Well, you know what? It's interesting that you phrase it that way, because one of the lessons that I've learned is that all of the kind of pain and criticism, and look, when you put yourself in the arena and you're out there, I mean, y'all better follow me on Twitter and Instagram, but don't be hating on me the way a lot of people do. Not on Instagram. Instagram is very sweet. People are much nicer there. Twitter, it's terrifying the things that people say. But this is what I have learned is that you have to learn to absorb the pain without it making you numb and without it devastating you. And so sometimes people say things with a tone where you don't want to listen, but I will try to say, okay, was that a fair criticism? Even if I didn't like the fact that you said it with some profanity laced in, did you say something I needed to hear? And so I think if you look at it like it's not, the pain is probably what I had to get the most used to. And it started out early when, I had an editorial that criticized me or a commercial mocking me. And my own best friend was like, it was a great picture. I'm like, you didn't read the story. So you can't take yourself too seriously. And so I've learned not to do that. I guess the biggest thing I would say that it cost, and I had to work at this, is time. Time away from my family, and I think I was a really good mom, but let's face it, I wasn't picking her up from school every day and dropping her off, and I didn't have the quantity of time that a lot of my other friends did, but I made up for it in quality. And you cannot have it all the time. And so that's the other reason why I don't like to talk about it in terms of cost, because I have a lot of friends who will say, oh, you got to do this. And I'm like, yeah, and you stayed at home and raised your children and had that joy. We all make decisions in our lives and in our careers, and they have consequences, and embrace those consequences.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Valerie. So excited to be here. My name is Andrea Jack. I am the CEO of my own accounting firm for 14 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed reading Becoming to hear about you from Michelle's point of view. And I know you made history being the longest serving senior advisor, but how did you feel being a part of history as with the first Black president of the United States? What was that like for you?
Extraordinary, terrifying. I felt enormous pressure. My staff used to joke, like before I ever went on television, I was so over-prepared, and that's part of the lesson of life, is you better be over-prepared, because I knew if I messed up, it wasn't just gonna be hurting me, it would be hurting him and his legacy. But to know somebody the way I know those two, and they are family, I don't have siblings, they are as close to siblings as I'm gonna ever have. And to be welcomed into that family unit has been just such a joy and a privilege, and they make me laugh all the time. And I think no matter where we are, you have to take the time to have those relationships and nurture them. And so to be a part of the first Black president's administration and to know he did not embarrass us ever.
Not even when he had on that tan suit, because I was like, that suit was fresh, okay? That's a good Sunday suit. That's what happens when the press corps doesn't understand fashion, but that's another conversation.
It was a pretty hip suit, but the point is this, they had to search for things like that. No scandals, nobody got indicted, people didn't lie, people were honest, people did their business. That's what he used to say. He would say this, and he was right. He said, we better be tight. We all better be tight, right? No harm in working twice as hard. It's good.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Marjorie St. Ellen. I'm a project manager at Turner Construction.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Male-dominated industry. Glad to see you in it.
Thank you. It's been said that Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. So,
Woo, did you all hear that? Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. All the way in the back, I hope you heard that. That was a good line.
so what do we do as a happy Democrat with a tan suit if, if we get someone that we're not necessarily in love with and the fight is on?
This is going to be our final question, because I think this is how we need
It's
to
a
do it.
good question. Look, do not let perfect be the enemy of the good. You keep your focus. And I will say this, I have met with several of the candidates who are running for president, several who are thinking about running for president. And one piece of advice I give them all is, do not do so much damage to each other in the primary that we go into the general election crippled, right? I mean, keep your eye on the prize, and I would say that the same. Look, one of the things, and look, I am a lifelong Democrat, and one of the reasons why I love my party is because it's a big tent. There is room for a lot of different perspectives in our tent. We might have some basic progressive values, but we embrace. We even let some Republicans and independents in our tent, right? And I think we have to continue that, and we have to really be mindful of the fact that we're not going to necessarily get that dream person again. And people forget, when Barack Obama was in Iowa, people in South Carolina weren't warming up to him right away. It took a minute, which is why I like campaigns, because it gives you a chance to lift up the hood and kick the tires and see what people are made of. But don't be looking to just fall madly in love. You want somebody, you're not going to be having beer and hanging out with this person. They don't have to be your best friend. They have to be true to service of our country and looking out for people who are not accustomed to being looked after. And full stop. Full stop. But I also don't say fall in line. Fall in line is a different thing, right? And I think that the Republican Party, when they fell in line when we were there, that meant saying no to everything, even if they knew it was something that had traditionally enjoyed bipartisan support. I don't want to do that either. We have to be thinking, and we have to be challenging ourselves, and we have to be reminding ourselves that in this brief time that we have on earth, whether you are in government or whether you are not, it is really important that you leave this earth better than you found it. Thank you, everybody.
Valerie Jarrett, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
All right.
Before we go,
One question. I want
you
you to dance with somebody you don't know. Find somebody you don't know. And some of you can come on up here. Because we know each other.
We know each other. Who's going to come dance with us? Hey, hey. Woo. Come on, lady. Hey. Woo. Woo. Y'all gonna give me a song playing on?
Oh, you have to get over there. There you go. There we go. Yay! Woo, ladies! How you doing? Hey! All right. Thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you,
Chicago! All right, ladies. We gotta go. All right, ladies. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I remember y'all. Thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you.
Good. All right, we gotta get off the stage.
Y'all dress me. Come on, get it.
We're gonna get the hug.
Thank you, girl.
You're welcome.
Oh, amazing. How was that? Oh, awesome. Oh, my God. Amazing.
Early.
Oh,